Hello and welcome back to the Great Lakes International Innovation Summit. We are excited to be kicking off the University Innovation Panel. And Sandra Cochrane, who is the Assistant Dean of the WMed Innovation Center, is going to join us and moderate this panel. And Sandra, I will let you take it away.
All right, well, thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for being here. Good afternoon and welcome to the last session of the day. We have a panel coming up, a discussion of university innovation. Our format will be a brief introductory presentation by each of our four panelists, after which we will all be on the screen together for a discussion and to take questions from the audience. So please drop your questions into the chat at any time. And with that, I think I get the honor of kicking things off. So if I can have my slides. Great. So as Megan said, my name is Sandra Cochrane. I am an assistant dean at Western Michigan University, Homer Stryker MD School of Medicine, and I manage the WMed Innovation Center. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background here on my slides about the center and kind of what we do. And then we'll have some discussion later. So let me go ahead and advance my slides. How am I advancing my slides? Did I advance? Okay. So I want to start out first of all with a quick video that hopefully will play properly. Here we go. Great. So that was a video that we put together when we were applying for a Small Business Administration Challenge Grant, which we actually did receive. We won a $50,000 award, and with that money over the past few years, we've been using it to support women entrepreneurs, especially in the STEM area. So as I mentioned in the video, the Innovation Center did actually open way back in 2003. We were in the Western Michigan University Business Technology and Research Park. It is a state designated tax advantage smart zone. And so we do serve all of the Southwest Michigan region when it comes to technology commercialization. We are a 69,000 square foot incubator and co-working space dedicated to high tech, specifically life science, technology, and engineering. We offer subsidized, low-cost lab space, office space, and meeting space, as well as access to scientific equipment and a range of support services for our entrepreneurs. Something else that I do at the Innovation Center that's dealing a lot with innovation is I manage the tech transfer office for Western Michigan for WMed. We are a small medical school, and it's interesting because we are affiliated with Western Michigan University, but we are not Western Michigan University, which is why we aren't able to use their Office of Technology Transfer. We have to have our own Office of Technology Transfer. And so the medical school is small, about 260 medical students, 200 residents, 300 faculty and staff, but we have a large group, 420 plus, of community faculty physicians all across the Kalamazoo area. Our annual research budget is very small, less than $5 million. We're getting mainly NIH grants, and we average about 2 invention disclosures per year, and we've only done 1 or 2 patents, and they were just provisional patents so far because we've only been doing this for about 5 years. We're a very small, very new medical school. And what I do looking inwards is doing workshops for faculty, students, and staff. We do some grant writing for academic researchers, and I work with BBC over in the Ann Arbor area to kind of coordinate that. We do intro to customer discovery workshops, and I encourage our faculty and staff to go through that when they have an idea. And I also do just general intellectual property training and education by going on grand rounds and meeting with a lot of the departments and explaining to them how the Office of Technology Development works so that if they do have innovative ideas, they know who to talk to, where to go, and what to do. And the last thing I want to point out as far as some of our innovation work that we're doing, I'm part of the group that is managing the WMed Masters of Medical Engineering program. It's a very new program. It's only been around for 3 years. And it's a 2-year program that interfaces between the traditional disciplines of medicine and engineering. And so it is a collaboration with Western Michigan University School of Engineering and WMed. We have faculty that are cross-appointed. So some of the engineering faculty are actually appointed into the School of Medicine, and the degree actually comes through the School of Medicine. It's a very small class size. Our goal is to only have 10 students per year. It's very small, very select. It focuses on clinical immersion, taking these Masters of Medical Engineering students and putting them into the hospital and into the clinic. And it does require a final thesis. And so they work very closely with their faculty advisors to do the work necessary. And with that, I'm done with my portion. That's me, and that's who I am. And I would actually then like to pass this off and ask Jason Blume, to introduce himself and tell us about his program.
Well, thank you, Sandra. I will dive right into my presentation. I am the executive director of Trine Innovation One. I'm a mechanical engineer and management alumnus of this institution, left and worked in industry in a wide variety of disciplines and organizations, from small 5-6 person organization to a multinational company. So had the opportunity to come back to my institution, my alma mater, and work in this capacity. So wanted to share a little bit about Trine University for those that may not know about us. We're located nearly as far north and east in Indiana as you can get. You can be to Michigan or Ohio in probably about 20 minutes either direction. And we've been here for well over 130 years and have been an engineering and technology institution for well over 100 years as well. Our campus is a modest size, just shy of 2,500 students here in Angola, our main campus. And then our enterprise-wide is just about 4,600 students. That includes our College of Health Professionals and our online non-traditional students and our dual enrollment. So as you would expect, we're very student focused. We are predominantly undergraduate. Of that 2,400, half of our student population on campus are in a engineering discipline. And then almost all of the rest of our students do receive a bachelor's of science. So 0 liberal arts here as an institution, but we do have some of that programming spiced in. So 40 majors, again, very, very student focused. And we're not a traditional research or R1 level of research program as you would encounter at a number of the other larger schools that we'll have on the panel today. But our main focus, being student-centric, is connecting that bridge between industry and our academic world. So I often say, when I was in industry, when I was managing a small manufacturing facility, if I wasn't producing a product, I wasn't being profitable. Well, a number of resources on our engineering campus are useful in the classroom when we're in lab or class, but are underutilized on the opposite side. So a Bunsen burner, everybody took high school chemistry, and they probably used the Bunsen burner once or twice, and then it got stowed away in the cabinet. I have that wonderful opportunity of leveraging any of those pieces of equipment outside of the classroom. So we really focus in 3 areas. The traditional area, Career Center, we have our projects and partnerships, and our community programs. I won't delay us too long as I talk, but we look at a holistic approach in our Career Center, and that opens up pathways for innovation. Our students are really focusing on experiential learning through their internships and co-ops, but then bring back those work experiences to campus, which cultivate opportunities and partnerships. The main focus of our Innovation Center is the project-based learning. At the core of every one of our disciplines, be it health science in the top or engineering is displayed around the bottom, is a hands-on immersion in learning. Over the course of the 7 years, well, almost 8 years now since we've had our Innovation Center, we have migrated from less than 25% of our capstone senior projects being industry partnered to last year, 80% of them were industry led. A couple samplings there on the screen of large corporations and modest local companies. And then just this last year, this is a sampling. Some of these companies you'll see there in the lower right. Tour de Cafe was a complete raw entrepreneur, and Blair Biomedical is a startup med device, as well as large organizations. Another area that we look at to spark innovation in our students' career on campus is through social impact projects. We are a partnered organization with Quality of Life Plus, which allows us to leverage all of our engineering resources on campus to develop life-altering solutions for individuals that were wounded in combat. In addition to that, our fastest growing program is biomedical engineering, which allows our students to connect with local individuals. The gentleman in the middle there, we developed a one-off design for a prosthetic for him to communicate with his stoma plug hands-free. We also, for a modest-sized school, we leverage a lot of our student teams for competitions, being nationally competitive in a number of the competitions that you'll see on the screen. To spark interest in our community and cultivate ideas, we host an annual Innovation Challenge, which is a technology and business pitch competition. We delineate those between the two. So typically the business has a robust business plan, but we don't want to negate individuals that have a widget concept that our students can then help them in our B school to develop a business plan. Part of also our Innovation Center goes all the way down to children. Those kids in the lower left are actually my son and daughter, as they attended our youth robotics camp. And then we have a STEM and innovation outreach program, STEM with Storm, Storm being our campus mascot, that we go around to all the area elementary schools and put on symposiums or half-hour topics on innovation, problem solving, engineering to spark our community to grow that type of culture. So appreciate the invitation to share a little bit with you about Trine's Innovation 1. And I'm excited to have a conversation with all of you. That concludes my portion, and I'll pass it off to Norm at this time.
Hello, my name is Norm Rapino. I'm here at the University of Toledo. I came to this position from a background as an entrepreneur for a pretty long time, and have had experience in lots of different kinds of startups and ventures. All of them started with an idea, grew, raised funds, and moved forward. And the way we work here at the University of Toledo is, I think, interesting. We have been growing our research budget under the leadership of Frank Calzanetti, who's been an amazing vice president of research. It's doubled in the last, I think, 3.5 years. So we have more positive research outcomes that are funded by the NSF, the DoD, et cetera. And in order to move things from a lab setting out into the world, it helps to have significant grant funding that pushed it forward. We probably are the premier solar research location in the world, I think. The folks who lead it are consistently getting tens of millions of dollars of grants to work on all aspects of improving solar energy outcomes, whether it's perovskites or just, CAD-TEL. We have a world-class group of people who are really deeply connected to companies like First Solar. We have a 40,000 square foot available incubation area divided over 3 buildings. And the university has over 20,000 students. College of Engineering has over 3,000 students. And our focus really in terms of innovation is to drive research outcomes. And according to the Association of University Technology Managers, AUTM, you have a real VC-funded startup typically for every $100 million of research that you put through. Now, this is a statistic that's been shown to be true for the University of Michigan, Purdue, Stanford, et cetera. So we don't have an awful lot of startups in the traditional sense here, the way they might in Ann Arbor. But we have an amazing technology transfer office led by a person named Steven Snyder. And they're absolutely brilliant at moving technologies forward into a licensing situation. And that is innovation as well. It really produces excellent outcomes for everybody involved in the project. So you could say that our innovation center supports technology, innovation, and translation, but doesn't necessarily lead it. And we work very hard to train innovators in the entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial path. And intrapreneurs are simply entrepreneurs within a company. And we're fortunate enough to have a relationship as a keen partner school, the Current Engineering Entrepreneurial Network. And the focus there is to add to the technical training that our students get from their engineering coursework. We add to that the professional skills that they need to prosper and really do a good job as an employee or an innovator or an entrepreneur going forward. One example of this is actually going on now. There's a company called Guardian Medical, came out of technology that was really spawned within the university. It's raised millions of dollars to move a particular technology in the med space forward. Didn't happen in a day, didn't happen in a week. It took many years to get to the point where it was suitable for VC money to come in. And that's what we always strive to do, but it's very hard to do. So we're focused on enabling our students to gain the skills to be able to think as innovators and entrepreneurs. Sometimes they can start a company, sometimes they won't. But they lift the entire ecosystem in terms of innovation and entrepreneurial thinking. That's really about it about Toledo. Be happy to pass this along to Diane Bouis from the University of Michigan.
Hello, and thank you for having me. My name's Diane Bouis, and I am, as a matter of fact, at the University of Michigan. Thank you, Norm. And thank you, Sandra, for putting together such a thoughtful panel with folks from different types of universities and different types of operations. I am at the University of Michigan's Office of Innovation Partnerships, formerly known as the Office of Tech Transfer. Many of you might have known as the Office of Tech Transfer. And I spied the logo on Norm's slide as he has previously been here. So I wanted to give you a brief idea of what we do and how we do it, and then also open it up to questions. So with that, let me make sure that I advance this. Hold on, there. It's our job to make sure that every University of Michigan research discovery has a chance to change the world, and we actually believe that. And so, changing the world can happen in many different flavors, and Sandra, Jason, and Norm spelled that out for us, right? It doesn't have to be a startup. Innovation comes in different flavors. And so it can be licensing, but it is also a real eye towards the ecosystem and the community. And the previous speakers have spoken to that one as well. So I wanted to give you a brief overview of the university and our office, a couple of metrics and highlights, and then depending on how we are on time, just go a little bit deeper into our work. I often find that even people who are in Ann Arbor underestimate just how large University of Michigan is. We are the largest public research university in the country. So largest public research university in the country. There are a couple of very large private ones with annual research expenditures of $1.6 billion. And so that's a very large research volume. And as you would expect, out of that research come a whole lot of invention disclosures. 19 schools, many top-ranked programs, as you can see on that connection graph. As you would expect, engineering and medicine are high on the list, but definitely not only engineering and medicine. And so what I didn't tell you is what I personally do, and I'll get a little bit more deeply into that. I run a physical space. The space I run is much smaller than the one that Sandra runs. I run 11,000 square feet of lab and office space for University of Michigan startups. It's called, so we're Innovation Partnership, so it's called the Innovation Partnership Startup Incubator. And usually when I introduce myself to a new group of folks, I say I'm landlord and mother hen to 20 startups and a resource to another 150. But what we do is not just startups. And so I'll continue here. Really what inspires us is to bring things that are discovered here into the world. So this is kind of just a high level overview of inventions that have come from here, some of which you may have heard of, some of which you haven't. Norm, I'm pretty sure you know all of these. No surprise there. Happy to go into different technology areas. But really, what we do is we have a team for alliances, a team in licensing, and a team in ventures. And so I'm part of the ventures team. I'm downstream from what is very often traditionally considered technology transfer. And so I'll go a little bit deeper into all three of those. So alliances, and people who have known the Office of Technology Transfer and are at the time sister organization, the Business Engagement Center, we have now, with this reorganization of innovation partnerships, come together. So alliances are really for industry connections, specific, sponsored research, and managing some of the large research alliances that we have with industry partners. That team is still growing, and so if folks are interested in that field, there are 3 job positions specifically within our alliances team currently posted. Putting it out there, this still is an audience of friends. Licensing is a very large group, as you would expect. We get about 500 invention disclosures per year. And so we have a group of folks well-versed in a variety of different technologies to take a look at those and usually get you an answer as to how we're going to pursue this. Patented, give you feedback on how to change it or improve it if we're not ready to patent it just yet, or say, it's yours, patent it yourself if you'd like. And so that is really a team I work with closely in the origination of the startups process. And then my team, we have a group of 12 mentors and residents on staff. So those are folks that have an exit or 2 under their belt in their respective industries. And we have them on staff for 20 hours a week. So a part-time, and if you were negative, you would call it an executive executive parking lot, I really look at it as an incredible resource to mentor some of our scientists, inventors, and founders on their path towards commercialization. And our licensing partners and team members bring in the mentors early on to help in that decision path. Is this a licensing opportunity, or should this be a startup? That's exactly what they do. So it's that close collaboration that really leads to good decisions early on and long-term relationships with the faculty that are inventing things. With that, kind of a snapshot, I mentioned the invention disclosures. 500 per year puts us in the ballpark with only 2 other universities in the country that have that sheer volume. We have over 4,000 technologies under management. For folks who are looking to license technologies, you can find some of the available technologies to license on our website. You can also find a listing of startups that have spun out of here on our website. So we filed a whole lot of patents last year, got 169 issued. A lot of licensing revenue. We often talk about the fact that the revenue that comes in is often the work of the licensing and ventures team of yesteryear, simply because it takes many years to materialize. The work I do today might bear fruit 5 or 10 years from now. And so a whole lot of license and option agreement as well. But the part that I busy myself with is the startup incubator, the companies that are in there as my direct clients walking by my door right there. We had three exits this year. And launched 23 startups. I would say the year before, fiscal year 2020, we had 30. I expect something between 25 and 30 for next year, but don't pin me down on it. And so with that, I'm briefly looking at the time. Really, if you think about it, what we do, what all of us do, falls into innovation, talent, and capital. You could even call it advice, talent, and capital. But innovation really happens when at the intersection of people and different skill sets. And so de-risking technologies, NTRAC, different states have track programs. So really early stage funding to develop ideas and inventions towards commercialization, and help in that journey towards licensing or startup. There are MTRAC programs at our sister universities across the state. So, and I think some of them are in the room listening and have been on earlier panels. So I don't really need to introduce them that much. That said, what I will say is we work very closely with the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. The mentors briefly spoke to those. This is a little bit more on their background, deep backgrounds, and what we do together. Part of my role is also finding talent for our startups. Eventually, you need to transition potentially to a professional CEO in your journey. And so my role is very expressly outward scoped to know people in the ecosystem who might be a good fit for one of our startups. And each of our mentors brings their own Rolodex and their own ideas to that table. Got the mentors in residence. This one I put in there just because capital is so critical to all we do. I'm not telling any of you anything new. We are all in the same bucket here. It takes us longer to raise money. It takes our startups longer to raise money. And that is why it is so paramount that we all have relationships, build relationships, and maintain relationships with venture capital to really make the right introduction at the right time. And that also includes relationships with each other. That's why we show up at meetings like this. And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention our own effort to remedy some of that. We just launched this year the Accelerate Blue Fund. And that is a fund specifically to invest in very early stage, high risk potentially high reward startups that come out of University of Michigan. It is an evergreen philanthropic fund. So upon exits, the returns will be reinvested. And so it is philanthropic. We have made the first 3 investments and are still in the process of fundraising more. We're towards a 20 million target. We are over 1 million and constantly fundraising. And with that, I think I'm actually going to just pause and say thank you and look for questions. I'll call out Sandra to potentially moderate the Q&A.
Yeah, if we can get all of us back on, there we are. We're all here. Well, I am waiting for folks to drop some questions in the chat box. There aren't any there quite yet, but that's okay. So if you have questions, go ahead and put them there. Otherwise, I'm going to start. I've heard some things come out as you guys were all talking. Fabulous programs, so much university innovation going on. Jason, I'd like to come back to you and ask you a question. You talk about your program, Innovation One, and you're really, it sounds like you're serving 2 main stakeholders. You've got your university students, you know, and they're either you're getting educated and trained and creating the workforce of tomorrow, and then you also have your private companies. Do you ever find it difficult to balance the needs of both of those groups?
It is a challenging task at times in that, with all due respect to the students, they do march to the pace of their own desires, right? So it can be challenging as every company or entrepreneur, wants something yesterday, right? So it is a balancing act, and I do play the part of liaison quite often. One of the key things that we have done is work to basically lay out an expectation with the companies to our academic schedule, and then build in deliverable milestones on the academic side. But to meet the more rigorous demands of a direct industry cause, we actually have complete extracurricular leverage capability that we do projects that are not curricular in nature, where we're leveraging the equipment. And we have the flexibility to basically hire a student to work for the Innovation Center to do a project on demand directly for an external client. So almost contract services, if you will. And it's predominantly leveraging any of the equipment or technologies that we have here to help them advance their needs. But it like you had alluded to, it can be a challenge that, well, why didn't the student show up at the crack of noon, right? You know, the rest of the world is up and moving. Well, sometimes a student isn't. But then also, on the other side of that coin, sometimes the expectation of an entrepreneur is, I want this, and then 5 minutes later, I want something else because I've thought of something else, right? So trying to rein them in to be able to work with a resource of any kind, be it a professional resource or a student academic resource. So that can be challenging, but it also is fun.
Great, thank you, thank you. Norm, I'm going to bring you into the conversation as well. I noticed when reading your bio that you actually are wearing many hats at the University of Toledo. You're executive director for the Center of Innovation, executive director of Rocket Innovations Venture Fund. You're a professor of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurially minded learning in the College of Engineering, and also a principal investigator on several grants. I was wondering, does your view of innovation change as you engage in these various programs at your university, or for you is that concept of innovation a steady thing that really doesn't change, it's always the same?
Well, my analogy would be like baking a cake or making spaghetti sauce. There's a way to bake a cake. You have to have ingredients, you have to have an oven, you have to have the right kind of mixing, you have to understand the time. But oh my goodness, there's so many different kinds of cakes. Well, everything that I do is based on simple principles of customer discovery, is there a market need, etc., and being a Socratic partner for people who want to do things. It's not my job to tell them that oh, this is good or this is bad. It's to help them figure out where they are and where they're going. And in every one of the jobs that I have, the same kind of activity occurs. I tell people all the time, I will never judge your idea. The market will judge your idea. So whether it's a student group or it's a faculty project or it's a project that's come from the outside into our incubator, they really need to figure out, is there a path to cash? Is there recurring revenue? So the object is to really help them understand where they are and where they're going and what they need to look for along the way. Long answer to a short question. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's absolutely fine. I like that. And I would like to ask Diane something, because as I said, I listened to all of your talks and thoughts were going in my head. When you were talking about your technology transfer function and how you have so many invention disclosures per year and they're moving through your process, and how does a technology at University of Michigan get assigned to either like the licensing group or to the venture group? Like, how does that decision get made as to whether to license or to create venture? What's that process like?
I appreciate that question. And this, so I may go into a long-winded answer as well. Bear with me, just because I would like to touch on students with whom I technically don't work at all, but I want to pause on that and then come back. So to answer your question, step one, a faculty or staff member who discovers something or makes an invention of
a commercial application, submits through the website a relatively simple form invention disclosure. And that is assigned to a licensing manager, one of my colleagues, and they take a deeper dive on it. And in the process of, all right, so nobody else has a patent on this, and there seems to be so it is their job to then run it by the market, so to say. They often come with their own industry contacts, and is this actually fulfilling a real need? Is there a problem that this is solving? Just because it is not on our scientists to really have the answer to, is this marketable? And in that journey of maybe there is some real commercial application, maybe it is in a different market than you thought. Maybe you thought it was in this industry, but actually in that industry, they have a much bigger problem. So in that journey, at some point comes the question of, let's bring in one of the mentors in residence. They have played that game and make that decision together. Whether this would be better suited. And Norm mentioned customer discovery. This is very much based on lean startup principles. Ask the market. If somebody says, heck, I will just license your patent right now, here's a check, then and the scientific founder or the inventor isn't opposed to it and doesn't say, I really wanted to start a company, then do that. If the market wants it as is, fantastic, because most of our faculty and staff members want to be great scientists, and that's what they came here for. So let them do that. However, if the best path forward, if the industry says, yeah, that's nice, but would you de-risk it a little bit more for us? I'm not ready to put my money on the table for this. Then perhaps the path is apply for an SBIR grant, STTR grant. You mentioned working with BBC. They're a great resource in helping write those grants. The mentors in residence get involved. Let's do that and see or apply for an MTRAC program, just to do more of that customer discovery, to do more of that technology de-risking, to really see where could this go. And at every step, and I feel that applies for all of us, especially with new technology, at every step on the way, we could discover that the science doesn't work, or that the market doesn't care, or that somebody else already has a product that fulfills this need way better and that we need to pivot. That is part of the nature of the beast. But let me come back to students. Because University of Michigan is so large, there is a total of 14 innovation and entrepreneurship organizations on campus, which is confusing at best, even if you're inside the university. And so the folks of the other 13 and I get together once a month to talk to each other about what they've got going on. And most of the time I introduce myself, there's always new people, by saying, and I'm the one who doesn't serve students, because as we are formerly known as a technology transfer office, if we work with folks who hold intellectual property that is owned by the university, and that Bayh-Dole Act, you're all familiar with it, that is by folks who are on payroll, and students are not. Students own their own intellectual property, and so the students work with one of the other 13 that are housed in the individual colleges and schools. So the medical school has Fast Forward Innovation, the College of Engineering has the Center for Entrepreneurship, and so forth, with a whole bunch of other schools. That said, because my role is outward scoped, if there's a student startup that I can help just a little bit through an introduction or two, that's not out of scope, out of my job. And secondly, entrepreneurially minded students are exactly the right type of talent that I might need to know anyway for the startups that are on my dance card, so to say, that it is my job to support. So student entrepreneurship definitely happens. It's not squarely in our office's to-do list, but I personally definitely consider it part of my job to at least be aware of it and at best helpful. Sandra, I think you're on mute, but we can fix that.
I got it. And it's interesting you say that, because I wonder, Norm and Jason, if you have the same thing that happens to you. So I'm like Diane in my institution, I'm usually looking outward, and I'm looking at industry, and I'm helping start up companies, and I'm kind of outward facing. But every once in a while I've got to turn and face inward, and it's like I have to wear a different hat. And am I talking to a student? Am I talking to a faculty member? And it's like, I sometimes find myself saying to them, well, as I talk to you as a faculty person, here's what I have to tell you, because you're an employee and you're developing technology and this and that. But then I can put my other hat on and say, but if you want to form a company, then we're going to be able to do some different things. Does anybody else have that happen to them, where you find yourself wearing different hats and trying to put yourself in different frames of mind, even though you might be talking to the same person? Does that happen?
I'll jump in on that.
Go ahead.
I live in a world, and I think Jason alluded to this, I live in a world of unreasonable expectations. Everybody thinks it's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be like a Hollywood movie that somebody's going to swoop in with a check for $1 million. And it's my job, I think, to slowly let the air out of the balloon, not pop it really quickly, by making them ask the critical questions. Why would someone invest in this? Why would somebody support this? Show me your path to revenue. I explain to them what investors are looking for. And I say, well, can you give them that? So I try not to. I think of myself as a person at a racetrack. Every project is like a horse. It's got to get to a goal. And there's a jockey on that horse. And I have no idea if that horse is a thoroughbred, a mule, an ostrich, or a turtle. It's not my job to decide what the vehicle is. It's my job to train the jockey to get from A to B, because it's never a straight line. So the more I can train them to think in a logical way about how to get to move forward, almost the easier it is for me to not have to give them bad news. They come to me with, oh, look what I found. Okay, no problem. Let's pivot. So I'm a trainer. I'm not sitting on the horse trying to whip it to get it to go faster. It's not my job. And therefore, it makes it easy for me to interact with people at every level, whether it's a student or a faculty or an investor, or anything else. I'm all about the process. And as you can tell, I wear lots of hats because I'm bald and I have to keep the sun off my head. I've been doing this for a long time. So I have some experience that I can relate to. I can give them an example of what you need to do to get from A to B. But it's really up to them. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. I see Stacy has commented that it happens to her every day, that, you're kind of trying to wear different hats and react in different ways. So that was really nice. I want to go back. Jason, you said something really interesting in your slide deck that I hadn't seen anywhere, and I was really intrigued by it. You talked about your youth outreach programs, and I love that idea. And so one of my questions for you is, did you develop those on your own? Was that a partnership with some other entities like the school district? And do you think that what you have is transferable to like other organizations like mine? Tell me about that. That's really interesting.
So the programs that we have, so one entity, kind of, I'm a history nut, so I'll go back to the beginning of our time. So Trine, formerly Tri-State Normal College, was created as a teacher's college in 1884. So we have remained a educational school, but through time it has diminished greatly. So and it's only about 15% of our campus. In addition to that, we are a charter school authorizer for the state of Indiana, and we have a charter school arm. One of the key things out of both of those entities are finding unique ways for our students to get experience. So you'll hear that reign true. Anything that we do at our institution is to grow student experience. So those outreach programs are great internships for an education major, or an opportunity for our engineering students, our criminal justice majors, anybody to interact in an outward nature. Now, let's be transparent. It is, a great way for STEM education to foster growth in future young people to enter our core competencies, which are health science and engineering, right? So as for partners, we have reached out through the area districts and kind of pitched the idea. And we actually have partnered with the state of Indiana's teachers union to connect with educators. So our last year's STEM with Storm program, we actually, like everything, had to flip it virtual. And instead of just going to 4 or 5 regional schools and doing this in-person 40-minute presentation, we made a video series, and we were actually able to leverage that with 70 school corporations across the Midwest, and it went to nearly 8,000 K-5 students. So it's outstanding how we were able to do that. All of those became our partners, right? So as you saw on I don't know if it was my second slide, it's expanding our university network to create opportunities and innovation. So literally, the management side of my brain is always be closing, right? So if I talk to somebody and they become a partner, they could be the next community outreach partner. It's in process, and by the end of the day, I have to turn in my judging scores for our first middle school hackathon. So we have 5 middle schools in our region, and we're doing a remote hackathon. So we're always trying to find ways to connect with those young people, because the innovators of tomorrow.
Yeah. And you brought up a good point, Jason. A lot of things have changed during the COVID situation. How has everybody been handling that and doing things? Norm, do you have some insights into that? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
What I find interesting is that customer discovery, which is the bedrock of any interaction with an innovator or an entrepreneur, teaching them to do customer discovery, is arguably easier in the COVID period because everybody's used to being on a video chat. And you don't have to spend time traveling. So a 2-hour interview that you had to go to, do, and come back now is 4 half-hour interviews. So in some ways, it's made us much more productive as we work with people for them to understand what they have. And I spend 80% of my time watching people blow their idea to pieces because we don't need something that's better than Facebook, or we don't need a new artificial elbow because it's going to be purple. I think it's really important to teach people to get information quickly and to be fearless about doing that. And it's almost easier for the engineers I work with to have the anonymity of being not in the same room with somebody and just trying to talk to them. And I don't think we're going to go back to the old way really completely. It's so much more effective and more cost effective in a monetary sense and a time sense to do it this way, because it's all about information. It's all about information.
I agree. We're all really getting used to doing this virtual experience. Diane, I wanted to ask you something. I was reading an article the other day, and it was examining the world's top innovation institutions of 2018. Granted, it was a little bit of an older article, but in 2018, University of Michigan was ranked number 23. And this particular article found 3 common themes in these top-ranked institutions: that they invest in R&D, they support collaboration spaces, and they maintain industry partnerships. And those are all things that I heard you talk about at University of Michigan. And, University of Michigan is a big behemoth. Do you have any suggestions for how maybe smaller institutions and colleges and universities like mine, maybe how we can accomplish any of those things when funding and staffing are very lean? Do you have any thoughts or suggestions?
I appreciate that question, and there are no easy answers, but I think we're all, to some extent, always working against the limitations of time and money. But specifically, I feel in the working closely with one's economic development authority. We're both in Michigan, and so the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, who are benefiting from some of the funding of the American Recovery Act. So there are opportunities to get some programs funded for which being a large research university doesn't make me a better candidate than somebody at another university. So there is really a democratizing and equalizing function there. So that's definitely something that I would put on everybody's radar. There's also the APLU, the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, that has, and so I recognize that not every university falls into that bucket, but being aware of the organization and some of their resources. Often it's also about information sharing and resource sharing. So that's with regards to some of the funding for staffing and programming. Then I think the part of your question, the collaboration spaces, I think is a really interesting one, because as much as I completely agree with Norm that we might not go back to a world where we do everything in person and travel hours to see people, there are times and moments when that is really critical, and we are learning which ones those are. We're having this conversation on Zoom because we can have a good conversation on Hopin, for that matter, pardon me, because we can have a meaningful conversation like this. But there are times, and so when we're talking about collaboration spaces, I recognize running an incubator where startups cohabitate, that sometimes running into somebody at the coffee maker and saying, hey, what do you guys do? Or, hey, do you know this investor? Or, hey, I'm trying to write this grant. Would you have a look at it? That really matters. But I would say, of course, we're a large university and we have a nice space and there is collaboration space, but there are also maker spaces in different towns and different cities, completely unaffiliated with the university. So very often my advice to anyone, actually, university or not university, is know your ecosystem, get to know your ecosystem. Is there a makerspace in town? I know that some University of Michigan startups went to a local makerspace here in Ann Arbor to use some of the equipment. You don't have to buy all of your stuff. You just need to know who has that type of stuff and ask the question. So I would say the headline here is find your tribe. And sometimes your tribe is at the university, but sometimes your tribe are the other makers. Sometimes your tribe is in economic development, because part of our role, yes, I'm at a university, but I live in a town. And if the startups that are not university startups here do well, we will all do well. So collaboration with local and national partners, I think, is really important. And that then ties straight into the industry relationships and partnerships, right? Get to know your partners, understand what they need. And I recognize that's it can be very daunting if you're a small office and there's one or two people and you have to choose how to allocate your time. Am I working with this faculty or staff member, or am I reaching out to an industry partner? And so finding a little bit of that balance, participating in meetings like this to show up, to make some of those contacts, and build alliances to some extent of how can we outsource or find resources outside of my institution that work, can be really great. One last thing that I want to throw in there, and I also just want to say I'm not getting a kickback out of this, but in terms of mentors, I know that there's an organization called AVX, Academic Venture Exchange, that helps people, especially in the heartland, find mentors in residence. They do matchmaking. We have not at University of Michigan used them, simply because we have our staff of mentor in residence. But practically, if there is not a statewide mentor in residence program or a regional mentor in residence program, and you simply can't find a mentor or an industry person with the type of expertise that you're looking for, sometimes looking to national networks like that, especially now that we're no longer so beholden to that person needs to live within half an hour driving of here, otherwise it's not going to work, can make a real difference. So find ways in which you don't have to do everything, and you can outsource some of the things you do by building collaborations or using external agencies or resources. That was a long answer.
No, that was a great answer. And I can kind of echo that, because as a small institution with limited staff and limited funding, I have really searched around to try to find people to collaborate and work with. And University of Michigan, you guys are great. I've actually come over and done like the Fast Forward Medical Innovations ICD program. I've brought people from my medical school to come over and do it at the University of Michigan Medical School. Yeah, it's like, why reinvent the wheel when there's something close by that works really well? So I appreciate that. Norm or Jason, do either one of you want to weigh in? Norm, go ahead.
I just want to very briefly say, it's really important to know what your boss wants you to do. And I've worked very hard to understand the ecosystem in which I live at the university and in my region. And there are things that will be fun to do, but that's not what I'm supposed to do. So the irony is, they just want us to train the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs and create recurring revenue either through licensing or startups. So it goes back to that baking a cake. They have very simple needs. And each of us is in really different ecosystems, but we really do the same thing. And I'm not surprised that none of us is 25. It takes time to make all the mistakes that I've made, to learn all those things, get the wounds that I've gotten, to try to be an effective resource for people.
What gave it away that I'm not 25?
Oh, I thought 29, close, but I didn't want to go there.
So and nobody has popped in any questions yet. I keep watching the chat. So folks, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of keep talking. Let's say so Megan is asking, if you had to start your program all over again, what would you add that has been difficult to incorporate into your program? There you go. Oh, we've got it on the screen right there. Jason, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. Why don't you take a stab at that?
If I had it to do all over again, so basically I nearly started this from the grounds up. So when I came in, there had been a prior lead in this role, but we really had never had this type of position nor capacity nor effort. If I were to do it all over again, I would, well, kind of going back to the prior statement, convinced to have a larger budget so I could have more headcount. But I don't know if that's even feasible. But I would have sooner identified my key stakeholder within the faculty, because ultimately my main success point is I can't force anybody to do anything on my campus, in that I am not part of our core competency as an institution, which is undergraduate traditional bachelor's degree education. I often say the icing on the top of the cake that makes our programs exciting. And if I don't find a faculty ally in each one of the programs that basically believes in what I do, it becomes very difficult to succeed. And had I been able to find a couple of those earlier on, I would have been able to do a couple other projects that I wish we would have been able to do. So
that's really insightful. Thank you. Thank you. Diane, anything that you would do differently?
And I have to say, I've only been here for 3 years, and so my perspective is and came from industry before that, and was a scientist before that. So I come with a slightly different angle to it. I often say to our startups that I am the clutch between very fast moving startups and a university moving at a different pace. And so and I can see you nodding and laughing. I am sure you're in that same situation. I think that's what we all do. And so entrepreneurs want something yesterday, and especially with a very large university, risks need to be mitigated, and nothing happens overnight. And so if I have a really good relationship with other folks around the ecosystem, and a slightly more arm's length relationship to the university might mitigate for situations like potential or perceived conflict of interest that take time to manage. So I would say anything that might put the university at risk of real or perceived conflict of interest triggers all sorts of legal clauses that take time to manage. And so a little bit more of an arm's length relationship of something that is affiliated with the university, but not directly part of the university, would be part of what I would ideally like to do. That said, I do not have that luxury, so that I am drawing up pie in the sky. But if somebody were to set up something from scratch, I would definitely recommend that.
It's good advice. Thank you. Norm, was there anything that you would add if you had to do it all over again?
I would make people understand what the definition of pre-seed is. There's an expression they want to bet on Monday Night Football on Tuesday. And so many people think that pre-seed is when you've got more than $500,000 or $1 million in revenue. Pre-seed is early, and it's hard to find in our ecosystem, in our particular region, people who want to support things early. And everybody thinks we're like Ann Arbor, where there's just money falling from the sky. Of course, there isn't. But somehow a better understanding of the reality of where we are. We used to have 9 Fortune 500 companies. I think we have 3 left, and they all went through bankruptcy. The middle class is gone here. We don't have the angel investor network. We don't have the talent here. My recollection is there's 1,000 postdocs at the University of Michigan all worried about what faculty job they won't get. So they want to do things. You really have to understand your ecosystem, and having the best understanding of it, I think, is the key thing. And being willing to talk to people like Jason and Diane and me about the lessons learned in our ecosystem. You know, you, Sandra, have your own specific world. And if somebody comes from my world and tries to talk to Diane and learn lessons, she can educate them a lot, but it doesn't fit the clients that they have. Really important to know who you are and where you are.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I was thinking, trying to answer that question for myself. I started my program 20 years ago. So if I had to do it all over again, I can really look back and say, what would I do differently? And I'm not sure that I would do anything different, but adding, I'd always wanted, and maybe I will still get it. You're talking about the funding and how important that is. And we don't seem to have enough, pre-seed and early stage kinds of opportunities over here on the west side of the state. A little bit more up in Grand Rapids, but in our community, it's a little bit scarce. And I think I would have liked to have spent more time trying to build that, find those partners, find those investors. That would have been something that would have been worthwhile. I would do that if I could.
I would find a way to say to people that you're really not smart if you don't jump into an I-Corps program, because you get local money, then you get 50K nationally, then your odds go from 12% for an SBIR to 60%. You can end up with $1 million. There really are established pathways to success, and it's hard to tell people about them in such a way that makes them really understand that this is the way to do it. This is how to bake the cake. The cake that comes out of this is really a good cake. And they want to do that, or they want to do that. God knows what they want to do. And it's almost too simple to tell them that.
I'd love to build on that. I often find, at least, so being a recovering scientist myself, I have a lot of empathy for my fellow scientists and inventors, but I have been in business for a while, and there is often a misunderstanding that I've got this wonderful thing, everybody will want it. The rest is just business. And how hard can it be? I'm brilliant. And especially at a big research university, that is correct. That person is genuinely brilliant. Yet the skill set that got them to this particular invention or this particular new thing is a completely different skill set from getting this thing into the world. That is why technology transfer offices exist. That's why we're all in the room. But that communication, yes, you're brilliant, and that thing is fantastic. Yet you reading a book about marketing is not all it takes to get it into the world. That is a hard conversation, and has to be had more than once and diplomatically.
Well, faculty tend to believe that they're the smartest person in the room because that's what they are when they're teaching or in their other circumstances. They're the smartest person in the room. And students are afraid to make mistakes in front of faculty because it'll affect their grade. Well, when you come into my room, Dr. Smith, you may not be the smartest in this particular discipline. And I say to people, who here has ever skied? Can you get better unless you fall? No, you have to fall. You have to test the limits of your competence. Students are afraid to do that in front of faculty. Faculty are afraid to do that in front of students. So you have to really make them understand that it's okay to be human, and there is a path to doing what you have to do. And some of them just embrace it, and others don't. And I've learned to not try to convert the unconvertible. I don't have enough time to climb the mountain of Dr. Smith who just doesn't want to do it, because there's 4 or 5 other Dr. Joneses, etc., or Dr. Patel, or Dr. whatever, who can.
Okay, quick question then. We've got a few more minutes yet. I don't see any more questions. Tom has made a comment. Thank you, Tom, that rural areas especially need to capture every valid entrepreneurial opportunity. Love that. It's very true. I have a question because we're talking about universities, we're talking about innovation, and I am involved. I haven't heard anyone bring it up yet, so I wanted to ask. I do some work, National Science Foundation. I help review grants. One of the grant areas that I review is the Program for Innovation grant. Is anybody involved with that with your university? Is that something that you are involved with? Do you know what it is? I assume all of you guys know what it is. Maybe I should explain it for everybody in the audience. But Program for Innovation is funding from the National Science Foundation to help bridge that connection between academic research and a commercial need. And they can provide money to the academic institution. So it's money for the institution, not for the business. But they have to have a business application or some sort of future potential. Is that something you guys are all engaged in? Jason, is that something you guys do over at U of Toledo?
So at Trine, I will say,
Fine, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Sorry.
At Trine, that is not something that we really are involved in that we're not a traditional research institution. So our faculty don't have to perform research. They don't write grants. They don't have to be published to exist. There's not a parrot publish or perish model. Our faculty are there to educate our students. And I often kind of equate what we're doing is research with applied application, right? So, I mean, we have companies come in and say, we have this problem, and our students are going to innovate within those navigational beacons, and they might develop a novel concept, and there might be, I mean, we're navigating 3 patents from last academic year right now. So there might be some novel invention, but we're not typically doing the tech transfer that all of you guys are. It's an exciting area that I would love to navigate, but speaking to what Diane and Norm said, it's understanding our ecosystem, right? If you were to put me into that, help you all because I have nothing. But if you want to put me directly in, as several of you said, you're not interacting with students on a daily basis. I just had lunch with 15 of them in the cafeteria, walked there and talked about projects. So I'm at that blade of grass level at times.
Nice. Norm, how about you? Do you guys do PFIs?
Yeah, all the time. In the beginning, the I-Corps was all about startups. Mm-hmm. And for 5 years now, I have not used the word commercialization or startup in my pitch to people to join the I-Corps. I say, I want to help you get to the next level of funding to support your idea, technology, et cetera. And I say, every program manager at the NSF or the NIH has a boss who said, okay, I've given you $27 million to invest in people and ideas. So I tell my people, you have to think of the folks at the NSF or the NIH as investors. You have to understand what they fund and why they fund it. You have to outthink them almost, outthink your competition, because they're supposed to invest in you, and they have to tell their boss why they did. So you really can come into the I-Corps program or another incubation program, doesn't have to be called I-Corps, and learn where the next level of support is going to come from and what are they looking to do for their outcomes. It's all about them. It's not about you. Too many people think the idea and it is about you. No, it's not about you. It's what your thing can do for somebody else. Then they'll support it, and then you get to buy the Ferrari. You don't just get a check that drops out of the sky.
I would like to buy that Ferrari one day. Well, we are coming to the end of our time, so I will begin to wrap things up. I'd first of all like to thank all of you panelists. Thank you, Jason and Norm and Diane, for all of your insights that you shared with us today. It's been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate your time. But all of you in the audience, don't forget, our GLIn Summit is not yet over. You're going to want to be sure to go and join our virtual networking session, which is going to start at 4:15. So when we wrap up here, don't forget to come back at 4:15, and I will see you there. Thanks.
Well, you stole my thunder. Thank you all for such a wonderful panel. Great conversation, great insights. And I love the fact that the panel had small and large institutions. I think that the perspective is just so valuable for all of us. And like Sandra said, please join us for the networking discussion. It starts at 4:15, so 15 minutes from now, we'll give you a chance to go get a quick break, take a quick walk around the block, and come back and join us for networking. If you can't make the networking session, we'll miss you, but please come back and join us tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock when we're going to have Charles Ross, who's the CEO of the International Business Innovation Association. He's going to talk about trends in our industry. So thank you so much. I appreciate you all and really glad that you participated in the Great Lakes International Innovation Summit today. Thank you.